Welcome home. Episode 16, where we talk about the transformation from troops and boots to veterans in the civilian world. I'm Andy Weins. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dylan Sessler. Dylan, what are we talking about today?
Well, obviously we have these two fine gentlemen over here that need to be interviewed. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
See, this is the beautiful thing about military types, right? We have all these things, the commander's intent and a mission and an op order, and we talk about Sergeant Major eats sugar cookies all the time, and now it's not even sugar cookies. Now it's lemon crackers, whatever it is, because now it's logistics instead of admin. We talked about this. Anyhow, we have all these things in the military, right? And dressed and this garrison environment that everyone's doing the thing, and then ultimately this is what happens. They're like, hey, you and three other people that you've never met before have to go accomplish this task and go. So here we are. So that's what we're doing today. Dylan and I have a military background, so do Patrick and Raymond, and we're going to figure out why we've all come together today on the podcast, and that's part of the joy of the time in the civilian world, because you find another veteran at a thing, like a networking event, you're like, oh my God, we're like best friends now because we have this bond, we have this culture that we both understand. I was on a call with felt like a podcast. I was on a Zoom call with Patrick like 2 weeks ago, and we started talking about coaching and mentoring in military. Basically, it was Patrick and I talking and three or four other people watching the magic happen, because we have this level of familiarity, even though, you know, he was in the military at the time I was being born, not to take a shot across the bow, but, you know, shots fired. So it's a generational thing too, and that's what we're probably going to get into a little bit today. So Dylan's coming in blind, the way we like it. I know a little bit about Patrick, and Raymond joined us randomly like 2 hours ago, email like, oh, by the way, we're going to have four people, which we've never had four people on the podcast. So
breaking records.
Hey, we've made up everything up until this point. Why not do this? So Patrick, Raymond, thank you for coming on. Introduce yourselves briefly, and then we'll get into some commentary and talk about this transformational period of our lives.
Well, I guess I'll go age before beauty, if that's okay with you, Raymond. I was in the military 1983 till 1989, so it was the Reagan years, and I was
Patrick,
in the.
You got out before I was born.
Yeah. I know. I honestly, and you know, for being as old as I am, I look pretty damn good. You know,
you look great. You look great.
Yeah. So, you know, so I was one of those folks that I grew up with very humble beginnings, very, very, you know, much of a struggle with my parents and my keeping jobs and paying their bills, and that shit just wasn't happening. And I was a good student. I wasn't a great student. I was a good athlete. Wasn't a great athlete. So I knew that I had to do something different to get a better life for myself. I did not want to repeat that cycle. And the only way at the time that there was something available like that was to go to college. And, you know, I wasn't going to get financial scholarships for my grades. Certainly wasn't going to become an athlete. And the Army comes out with Be All You Can Be. It was the reboot of the GI Bill, and there was nothing like that for a long, long time since the GI Bill. So Be All You Can Be, I'm seeing these commercials, and they're like, we'll pay for, you know, your college, and we'll do this, we'll do that. And I talked to the recruiter. Keep in mind, I'm 16 going on 17. I'm a young kid with not a lot of role models above me. No one's gone to college in my family, and I'm talking about going into the infantry. They're the only ones who offered the Be All You Can Be college program. And Ronald Reagan's the president. And honest to God, I was more afraid of him than any other enemy, foreign or domestic. I thought we were going to go to war, and I'm a 16-year-old kid, right? Who do I ask? I don't have really good role models above me to ask. So I know that I'm not sure. So I tell the recruiter I'm going to take a pass. A couple of weeks go by. I start to realize I'm either going to be washing dishes the rest of my life, or I'm going to go join the military. I'm going to go to college. And you're going to all get a kick out of this. I call the recruiter back. I'm like, hey, do you still have that opening in the Army? I think I want in.
Yeah, the paragraph. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, we do.
They'll make a paragraph and line number. So for non-military, paragraph and line number, right? They will always have that opening. If you say 11 Bravo, 11 Charlie, I'll do
11
that.
11 Bravo, yeah. 11 Bravo was infantry. That's, you know, I was going in to be the traditional bullet catcher, right? So the folks who trained me, they were the Vietnam vets. And I never met better soldiers in my life in terms of tactics, in terms of land navigation, in terms of decision making, in terms of team building. I was blown away as I was 17. Actually, I had to have my parents sign when I turned 17. So I was really young when I was deciding. Turned 17, they signed the papers, and I could join, and I could go to boot camp before my senior year of high school, come back, finish high school, go after. It's called split option back then, and then go off to college, and then serve. And I was blown away at what became my heroes, and not because they were like badass soldiers, but the quality of their character and the role models I didn't have. And I met these guys who were really underappreciated when they came back from Vietnam and were serving their country and training the future. And so it opened a lot of doors for me. And, I was just talking to Dylan ahead of time about, progressing through life and being the age I'm at now. And it's been a long time since I was in the military, but seeing my daughters grow up and they're in their 30s and late 20s, and seeing what's come from that one decision and how many doors it opened and what it did for me. And so, flash forward now, I've got my own company. It's a veteran-owned small business recognized by the state of Illinois. We do graphics, large format graphics, like the wall graphics, window graphics, and we also do professional coaching and consulting. So where I try to give back is a lot of times with veterans, especially helping them assimilate when they come back out of the military into civilian careers, not just a job. Anybody can get a job, and staying on the path and talking about whatever I can help with. So, and Raymond, I was lucky enough to meet. He's a veteran who recently transitioned. I'll let him tell his backstory. But we met, Andy, just like you and I, we hit it off immediately. I really didn't know him that well, but there was just something about being a soldier and connecting. And lo and behold, he comes to work for me, and he's only in his first month, and he's already made so much progress. And it's a great transition for him into being an entrepreneur and running his own business. So I'll turn it over to Raymond, unless there's anything you guys wanted to clear up fry about the 80s with me.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
They got the History Channel for that.
Yeah, it's in black and white. Madonna was young back then.
Yeah.
Who's Madonna?
Raymond, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, you know what? Since we're talking about timelines, I'll go ahead and pick up in the 80s because I was born in 81. So that's perfect, Keegan. Thanks for the thanks for the tee up.
Yeah.
So my name is Raymond. I'm recently retired Army vet. Served 20 years. Originally from the South Side of Chicago, born and raised. So I kind of got a crash course in adversity before I even left for the Army. Needless to say, when I joined the Army my senior year of high school. I was in the delayed entry program, and it's like the recruiter didn't have to come find me. I found the recruiter, and I sat back and I vetted every single branch. Marines, Navy, Air Force. Not really Coast Guard, but nothing against Coast Guard. I love the Coast Guard, but at the same time, for me, I vetted all branches, and it's just something about the Army that just kind of stood out to me a little bit more. So hey, I decided to go with the Army. I joined. I was in the delayed entry program for about 5 months. I graduated high school May 9th. My grandmother then moved from who raised me, moved from Chicago to LA. I helped her move there. I flew back. I stayed with my aunt at the time for less than 24 hours. A recruiter came and picked me up the next morning. So 2 weeks later, I was gone after high school graduation. I wasn't trying to waste any time. Again, trying to get away from rural environments, just not trying to become another statistic, because I've seen enough. I've seen enough of it growing up. And once I left, I never looked back. Of course, everyone gets homesick. Everyone gets like, what, man, I really miss being at home, and I miss my friends and my family and so on and so forth. But for me, my dose of reality was the first time I came back to Chicago to visit after I had left. It had been roughly about 5 years, because I would go visit my grandmother in LA because she practically raised me. And when I came back here to Chicago, and I kind of, looked left, looked right, things just didn't, wasn't the same, because I had evolved. Not saying that, I was better than anyone here, but of course, you get exposed to different things. I was already, on my third duty station. And I had been, my first duty assignment, they sent me to Germany. I was there for 2 years, left there, went to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, did about 3 years, some change out. No, yeah, did about 3 years out there. And then I had just gotten reassigned to South Korea. So I'm on my second country. Like I'm on my second or third country now. And I come back home and I get exposed to, a time capsule of where everyone is still standing in the same spot. And you're trying to like drag and pull someone along with you. Hey, let's go do this, let's go do that. And you realize quickly how much you've evolved, um, and how much experience that you have, even though you don't see it yourself because you're doing it every day. You're complaining about it. These people don't know what the hell they're doing. Like, this is a shit show. This is, whatever. Until you come back home, or until you get exposed to an outside entity, and you're like, wow, well, I guess it's not that bad. Where I'm at. So after that, needless to say, I went back to Korea. It was time for me to re-enlist. I told the career counselor, hey, I'm like, what's the max? He told me 6 years. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna make you a deal. I was like, if you can get me back overseas or keep me overseas. At that time, I tried to get Japan. They didn't have any slots for my MOS, which was a 91 Bravo at the time, which was a light wheel vehicle mechanic. So he said, no, we don't have anything for you over there, but I can get you back to Germany, or I can get you to Italy. I'm like, you know what? Guess that's a no-brainer. Go ahead and ship me back to Germany. I can always shoot over to Italy, on a 3-4 day weekend. That's too easy. So I ended up back in Germany. There, deployed again to Iraq. By this time, I'm on my second Iraq deployment. I got 3 total, and from there I was tired. I was like, you know what? Hey, listen, it's time for me. It's time for change. I needed to do something different, so I volunteered. Even though guys told me I was crazy, I volunteered for recruiting duty because guess what? That was the longest special assignment that'll keep you in one spot, without deploying, without going to the field for mass amounts of time if you're in a high deployable unit. So I'm like, you know what? Hey, whatever. I'll take the break. So guess what? Recruiting command was like, come on in, fella. Come on in. We got you.
they had openings, just
Come
like Patrick.
Exactly. Like, come on in. We got you. Come on in. Like, let's just say that's the quickest I've ever seen any orders processed ever. Ever. You know what? My orders for recruiting command got processed faster than my leave form. Like,
Yeah.
man, I was like,
Naturally.
I had orders, I had everything, finance, budget, you name it. And so, needless to say, I left Germany. I went to recruiting duty in Phoenix, Arizona, which I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. I had along the way, I've had some pretty good mentors. One of my mentors actually turned me back into completing my civilian education, because at the time I was all like, strapped up. Hey, let's go do this. I had the generic answer that your squad leader, your first sergeant, or whoever asked you, sergeant major asked you, hey, well, where do you plan on being in the next 5 years? Well, sergeant major, I plan on being, I want to be the sergeant major of the Army, blah, blah, this and that, your basic cool answer. He's all right. Yeah, that's great. That's cool. He was like, but where are you on the civilian side? And I was like, I'm still thinking, oh, well, I got this certification. I'm just knocking them out. Like, boom, I got this, I got that. Okay, what else you got for me? No. He was like, how much civilian education do you have? And I said, just a little bit, because I'd taken a few classes, but I never really took it serious to actually dive all the way in. And I was like, my soldiers had more education than I did, civilian education, because I made that a priority for them, because I was taught the same thing growing up, as a young pup, in the Army. But again, as we get older, as you progress, you kind of like steer away from it, because listen, mission dictates. I got to worry about this. I got to make sure my guys are good, X, Y, and Z. So everyone is fine. But at the end of the day, you always forget about yourself. And, and for me, that was really important. I got a chance to hone in on my civilian education, which, I thought was going to make me more, we'll say, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Marketable?
Marketable and appealing on the civilian side, because I was already 10, 12 years in the Army. And I'm like, you know what? I'm strapped in for the long haul anyway. So finished my time in recruiting duty. Didn't have time to finish my degree. As soon as I got to Fort Bliss, Texas, they were like, hey, fella, welcome back. Hey, we're going for a ride. Okay, let's go. So they sent me, I went to Bagram. Spent about 9 months in Bagram in Afghanistan. From there, this is deployment number 5 for me. So I'm like, you know what? Okay. So I got about 3.5 years left. 3 years left before I hit my 20-year marker. By this time, I'm a sergeant first class, and I'm like, you know what? Okay, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna keep trying to like chuck along and play Russian roulette with these deployments? And by this time, I have two wonderful kids. My sons right now, my oldest will be 14 next month, and my youngest is 12. So I'm like, hey, there's only so much time I can spend away from them while still trying to teach them how to be young, responsible men, and just kind of like for me, it was more of a focus based thing because I needed to do okay, look at the big picture, not just the Army. Okay, the Army's great. The Army has provided an outstanding, some outstanding um, opportunities for me. I've
Mm-hmm.
traveled, I've met a lot of great people that I still keep in touch with. It's provided the life that I currently live now. And and someone asked me all the time. People ask me all the time, Remy, would you do it again? In a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. Because for me, the military, joining the Army, I joined the Army for one reason, but I figured out why I stayed for another reason. I know it's going to sound corny, but the first reason why I joined was I just wanted to make a way. I just wanted to get, I wanted a fresh start. I wanted to get away from all the riffraff, all the, the things, all the great and wonderful things that go on, in, in my environment. And as I went along and I started meeting these great people from all walks of life, my brothers and my sisters in arms, and I've, found more so like, okay, I love this shit. Like like this is for real. Like I love it. Like I love the military. Like like patriotism. Like you feel it. It's nothing
Mm-hmm.
that you can really talk about to someone that has never lived it. So I get goosebumps even talking about it now because when people ask me, I'm like, hey, well, how was it for you? I'm like, I'll do it. I'll do it in a heartbeat. And they look at me like I'm crazy, but they'll never understand that until you're actually put in that position. So anyway, for me, that was the reason why I decided to kind of like continue my education. I was able to graduate with my marketing degree about a year before I retired. So year 19 and 19 years and 6 days, they say, you know what, hey, Sergeant Hookfin, you've done great things for us. We know your retirement packet has been accepted. Guess what? We're gonna make you promotable. Oh, great. Made the master sergeant list. Okay, hey, you know what? That's outstanding. But you know what? I'm still going to retire because guess
Yeah.
what? Would have owed them another 3 years. And I was
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
you know what? No, I'm good. And within that time span that I would have spent if I would have accepted that promotion, I would have missed a lot, with my family, not being there, missing, football tournaments, baseball tournaments, sporting events, et cetera, all the things that I lived through a lens and I lived through pictures, through, Skype back in the day, all the good things that, we kind of like, we have in our photo albums or we post up in our wall lockers whenever we're going on our foot lockers, whenever we're deployed, for the loved ones that we have back home. So for me, it was a trade-off knowing that, okay, hey, I'm giving up, not really giving up, but I'm moving on to a different lifestyle that I know that, I could definitely sustain myself, once I retire, but also I'm gaining uh, my my stability, mental stability, my health, because it does take a toll on you, and for those that have never served, it's when people look at your physical appearance, they say, oh, you're fine, because you're not allowed to have a bad day. You're not allowed to have this and X, Y, and Z. But again, it's such that it's such uh, a rigorous thing that you go through day to day. Whether you could be throwing foot lockers around, you could be throwing bags around, or you could be sitting at a cubicle staring at a freaking spreadsheet all day. Stress is stress, and a lot of people really don't get that. But needless to say, I am where I am now. I retired 2019. Then I sat around for a few years, enjoyed my family, and I decided, you know what, hey, listen, it's time for me to get off my ass and actually do what I want to do, and that's start my own business. And I ended up meeting Patrick, and it was kind of like staring at myself because we kind of give off the same energy when we're in the same room together, and we're talking, and everything starts gelling, and I didn't actually come back to revisit things with Patrick until maybe about a good month and a half or two later. At the time I was currently moving and just trying to get settled in. And on a whim, I was like, "Hey, Patrick, just the same thing." Like he asked our recruiter, "Hey, is that position still open?" And he was like, "Yeah." And the great thing about working with Patrick is that he knows my intentions, my focus. As far as having my being my own entity, in sales and marketing, coming on, helping his team. And I get a chance to learn a lot because that's one thing too that I'm very understanding is that, you know, no matter how successful you have been before, if you're going into a new element, you need that mentor, you need that guide, you need someone to say, hey, listen, all right, buddy, I need you to keep me straight, because sometimes, I told him this earlier today. For me, I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to just, like focusing on things, saying, you know what, hey, listen, I'm being too hard on myself in one area, trying to taper back a little bit. But for me, it's been a great experience. Definitely, happy to be, aboard the team, and, just trying to, see how far I can take this business and take over the world.
So when you were, let's go back to that. So what did you do? So 2019 hits, you get your 20 years, you decide not to take the Master Sergeant position. So now it's 2019, and what did you do for those years? Were you doing any side hustles, working, or were you full-time dad, hanging down and enjoying and living off retirement?
Yep, living off retirement, full-time dad. I was waking up in the morning, making breakfast, making sack lunches, walking my kids to the bus stop. All the little things that I had missed when I was gone before, because they were still young, fourth grade, like third grade, and fifth grade. So they were still small at the time, or a lot younger at the time.
Where do you live now, or where were you living then, and where are you living now?
Well, at that time, I'm still in the Chicagoland area. So at that time, I was living in Des Plaines, Illinois. Now I'm living in Montgomery, which is like sits on the border of Aurora and Plainfield.
Yep. And wife, she work, or are you married, or?
Yeah, currently separated at the time.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. So you're all right. So it makes sense. All right. Yeah. No, and the reason I ask those questions is I've been a reservist. Dylan's been in National Guard, and so we've always lived in the two worlds.
Yeah.
And so when you go from one world to the next, there's a lot of people I see that struggle because either they go to one extreme or the other. In your case, you went to the complete opposite extreme, which is no working, full-time, doing the thing of, dad. And sometimes people struggle with that because they don't have that sense of pride or purpose that they experienced when they had rank and they had responsibilities and they had subordinates, right? Or other people to go the opposite route where they get right back into a career and they don't achieve at the same or similar level than they did in the military. Because 20 years in the military is not 20 years in the civilian world. It's culture, the language, the hierarchy it's different. So the fact that you for 3+ years were like, no, I'm doing this, and you were successful at it, and you can't make up for lost time. It's a logical fallacy. The fact that you then reprioritize and made your children a priority and did those things like making breakfast and walking kids to the school bus, that's, or the bus stop, whatever it is, that most people don't get to do, anytime in their lives, unless they've manufacture their schedule or their lifestyle to that being a priority. Mm-hmm. So what have you noticed in those 3 years? What changes? You talk about when you came back, 5-6 years into your time in the military, the lens that you had. What were some things that you had thought when you got out that proved to be inconsistent or not true with reality of what you thought the civilian world was going to be like?
Oh my God. Man, so I left out that little time. I left out that gap on purpose because I didn't want to take over this entire podcast.
No, that's that gap is why we're here.
Yeah.
Because here's why. Because from a selfless service standpoint, our listeners are where most of our listeners. So Dylan and I have been doing this for almost a year now. Originally, we did short form stuff on we did TikTok, we did YouTube, we did LinkedIn, and the majority of our listeners are E5 to E6 that have somewhere between like 6 and 10 years in, or they're like 05 to 06 that have 20+ years in. And they are the what do I do now people, right? We don't get a lot of the 4-year guys that, did their 3-4 years, bounced and figured out. Because if you join at 18, you get out at 22, you're basically like a college student, or a college graduate. We're just like, yep. But when you get in at 16, 17, 18, and you get out in your mid-30s or late 30s, it is eye-opening. You've never been an adult in the civilian world.
Oh my God.
And so one of the biggest challenges I've seen is I'll get people that call me like, hey, some guys that are like, hey, I'm getting out in 6 months. What do I do? Or sometimes people are like, hey, I've been out for 6 months. What do I do? And I struggle because I've only ever known the two worlds. So I really want to focus on that time period because that's the critical point. And now you can say 3 years later, I'm living the life I want to live. And there were some things that some assumptions you had that didn't pan out or did pan out. And I want to hear those so I can be a better advocate. And also so our listeners can better understand these preconceived notions of things that were planted in by the military, intentionally or not, what sticks. One of our first guests, they said, hey, whatever you learned during TAPS, transition assistance program, throw it all out. That was his. I was like, that was his nugget. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I want to hear, so we already cleared that. So I want to hear from you. What were some of those things that you thought that ended up not being true, or those things that were true and maybe you didn't believe at the time and you now had to double down on?
Well, I'll start with this. I'll tell you what. Being that we're so structured around time, being 15 minutes early to the 15 minutes early to the 15. So you're like always an hour early wherever you go, right? So even though like there's a lot, we deal a lot with time, a lot with structure. It's ingrained in you, So when you have these large gaps of time where you have nothing to do, and like you're like trying to pull stuff out of the air, like, you know what, hey, listen, I've just knocked out my to-do list. I've done this, I've done that, I freaking painted rocks. I've done every single thing under the sun, 10 times over. You kind of fall into that little pocket. And I know, and I can speak for myself, having been, going 20 years hard in the paint, boom, just full speed, go, go, go. I'm used to having someone call me on the phone 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, this happened, that happened. I'm stuck here, this X, Y, and Z. And you, at the time, you're so sick of it. You're like, God damn it. Like, I can't wait to like be able to just like, sit still where no one has to depend on me. No one has to call me. I don't have to show up for formation. I don't have to, fill out a form asking to go to the next state over, things like that. But when you actually have that access, when you actually have that freedom, you don't know what to do with it. Not saying that, you're codependent on the military, but it becomes a part of you, because especially if you're considered a lifer and you're in it 20 plus years, you get used to a certain way of life. Not just talking about where you're stationed at, but the communication factor. And I'll go ahead and fast forward. We'll say about 4 or 5 months later, after I retired, I picked up a little part-time job at a Patrick Cadillac in Schaumburg. So I picked up a part-time job there as a salesman, actually. So I was there, just messing around and, whatever, and trying to kind of feel around and see how it was in the civilian sector. My goodness. Let's just say my expectations were a lot higher, because, we always think grass is green on the other side. Oh man, I can't wait to be a goddamn civilian. I can't wait to, do this. I'll have to listen to these guys, X, Y, and Z. And then when you get there, you're just like, hey, hey, Jim, can you help me? Whatever, I got to make a run real quick, or I got to help this other client. Can you cover down? Oh, no. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. Either they don't get paid for it, or they just don't want to help you out. And there's no type of camaraderie within that that I've noticed. Like, that was a shotgun blast to the face, and I just could not believe it. And I was just like, it was something simple. And I was just like, that kind of like really shook me a little bit. And I was like, man, I couldn't believe this. This is the civilian sector. This is what I've been striving to get to all these years.
It's hard because I was in the 80s and out processing was like non-existent, and they treated National Guard like, the ugly stepchild. But like there wasn't internet where you could just go, hey, go Google this, or go, here's this website, so there's a lot of focus on resources for veterans, especially nowadays. But there isn't anything that prepares you for the absolute incompetence that's accepted in the corporate work world outside of the military. I mean, the esprit de corps you have, the chain of command that's accepted, the bond you have, when you go through, just the fact that everyone shares boot camp, and then you go on to your specialty, your MOS. And I know that to this day, like, people go, God, you're a high achiever, you're this or that. I'm like, I still struggle with the incompetence of just like humans, and you talk about hurry up and wait. And then you think about the amount of meetings you spend your time in, in corporate America, and you're like, how do you get anything done? Like, we're meeting about a meeting, we're waiting on the word type of thing. And so there's got to be a better job of, onboarding military folks into the real world, because there is a dial down that it's hard to do, because like you said, you get accustomed to, a structure, not just that people tell you what to do and you follow orders, but there's this unwritten code that we all live by, and it works, and it works well.
So I will interject to say something. Reverting back to what Andy said about the other veteran that said about the what he said about TAPS. As far as the out processing that you go through. I want to say when I went through it, was they call it TAPS, Soldiers for Life,
Yep.
And there were two things that I pulled from. Yeah, I would say three things that I pulled from there that I would say that someone really needs to pay attention to when they're exiting. One, the disability briefing. You definitely want to pay attention to that. Two, the other financial briefing that you get as far with financial / medical. Whether you serve 4 years or you serve damn near 40, you need to pay attention to that. As far as like where you need to turn, what do you need to do whenever something happens to you? You get sick, your one of your family members gets sick, if it applies, how it's going to get paid for, what the simple things that you actually say when you actually go to the doctor. Who is your insurancer? Who insures you? And if you don't know the correct verbiage, or to say, hey, I'm TRICARE East, I'm TRICARE West, I'm TRICARE Select, whatever, that could cost you thousands of dollars. If you say the wrong thing, they bill you incorrectly. Trust me, I found that out the hard way. And the third thing is LinkedIn. I didn't have a LinkedIn account before I did my out processing. I didn't think I needed it in the Army. For what? Everybody that I talk to, I can reach out to them on global. I'm like, what do I need LinkedIn for? That's my LinkedIn, global in these command and staff meetings that I was made to go to. So that was my LinkedIn, or the Right Arm Knights. So for me, that was my introduction to the civilian side. To like, okay, there's a lot more to networking than just saying, hey, battle, can you shoot this guy an email? I'm getting ready to go over there to Fort Polk, or I'm going to Fort Hood. Let him know I'm coming, or give me a point of contact, give me a POC for this guy. Okay, that's how we communicate. Well, that's how I communicated.
Yep.
In the Army. I wasn't sending emails ahead of time, but I would tell you this: the LinkedIn was definitely a great tool then, and still now, to kind of like get your feet wet. So to get your name out there, your resume, your history, because people actually look at that. People look at your military history, what you've done before, who endorses you. Even if no one endorses you, it's a free snapshot as someone that just wants to look you up and say, hey, I need to know, if he or she is valid, and what have they done before they showed up at my doorstep.
And the other nice thing about LinkedIn is it gives you an opportunity to peer into the civilian world. The way that people speak, the copy, what are they sharing, what topics are relevant. There's a lot of things that we have in the military that we consider to be relevant that are completely socially unacceptable in the civilian world. So you get right, because on Facebook you end up, I remember I got back from when I got back from Iraq, Facebook was like coming out, and I got a Facebook account, and I hated social media at first. I'm like, this is stupid. Like, but when you're in the military, you don't need it. You don't need social media. You got your best friends to your left and your right. You don't need to know what's going on. And then away you go. And then same with work. I worked for years where it's like I had a LinkedIn, I never touched it because I didn't have a reason to. And then once I became a business owner, I'm like, oh, I need to use this tool and watch what they're reading and watch what they're thinking. And also when you go to a networking event, someone's like, hey, did you hear about this? Or then you can be like, oh, I read this in the Wall Street Journal or the, New York Times or whatever it is, even if it's a crap article or poorly written or biased in one way, at least you're aware of what's going on in business. Because I can tell you, people often ask us, well, hey, what's business like? And then when I say, oh, if I just say, oh, it's slow, well, that's the end of the conversation. Versus saying, hey, this is what's going on with my business, and these are some of the global and local and state contributing factors that are leading to this, and whether it's rise or fall. Like right now, the housing market is slow, and my business revolves a lot around the housing market. So you're damn right. I'm reading what the trends are, and I'm also listening to what realtors are saying. because there's some realtors out there that are killing it right now. Well, I'm going to align myself with them. Hey, what are you doing right now that's working? And you'll see a little bit of that on Facebook. With LinkedIn, you get less of the noise and less of the garbage. So for one of my key takeaways right off the bat here, hearing that you said LinkedIn was a good tool, my challenge to people that are, transitioning, I'd say 2 years before, start sprucing up your LinkedIn, put on your accomplishments, right? Go through, it used to be called your I Love You book. And now it's your dang old iPerms, right? Go on there and put in all your awards, put in your duty stations, put in the different roles and responsibilities you had. And then spend, I don't care if it's 15 minutes, a half hour a week on LinkedIn, watching what people are saying, seeing where your network that was in your military is now, because they're still your network. So go find them. I remember that was one of the things I did. I added a bunch of people I was in the military with right off the bat, because at least it was a starting point. It was able to start my network, right? I have, 10, 11,000 connections now. And it started with people that I actually knew. And then you just add random people, and tons of people fucking spam you, and that's all part of it too, And I also see that people transitioning too, they get hemmed up because whether it's, I came from the franchise world, but whether it's a franchise world or companies out there, in colleges are the worst, and they were the worst for the longest time. They got that yellow ribbon money, when they see for private school, they get paid. Actually, my alma mater is closing, and I remember they were using me to recruit military hard because it was guaranteed money. It's like, man, can you maintain a C average? We're guaranteed money. And the schools didn't have to deal with financial aid or students paying cash and going to collections. So there's a lot of pariahs out there, and the more you see it, the more you start to see it. If the transitions assistance program is the first time you're being exposed to opportunities in the civilian world, man, the one thing that sounds cool and shiny is what you're going to go for, versus having hundreds of data points to see what is legit and what's a good fit.
You're right.
Raymond, a question for you, and Patrick, I think we'll have to ask you a question soon because you haven't been able to speak well, but we'll get there.
That's why I brought Raymond. I think he's got such relevance. He's got so many more years. There's just a lot there.
We'll have episode 2 with Patrick, the Lost Generation.
Like I said, Madonna was young.
But Raymond, you said you did marketing classes when you were still in, correct?
I did, yes.
And you've done marketing since then, or not?
Since I retired, no. Okay. Actually, no, I haven't. So this is my first, and I joke with Patrick. I tell him, hey, this is my first real job of my life ever. And
how old are you?
I'm 42.
Okay. Oh, I love that, because that fits with one of the bits I do in the narrative. It's like, you see, a grown ass man in his late 30s, early 40s, and you say he's never been to do an interview before. And they're like, what do you mean? They're like, the interview for the Army is, hi, I would like to join. And they're like, okay,
you
you're
got
in.
That spot open?
Yeah. The interview for the Army. This is the interview for the Army. Yeah, he's got a pulse.
He's got a pulse. Right. Can you fog a mirror? All right, you're done. Right. And an interview is significantly different than being on a board, being in front of a board, or right where it's preconceived. Now it's like, hey, we want you, like you were saying about the answer you gave the sergeant major. It's like, we all know the hoorah. Right, who are like, hey, sergeant major, yeah, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna go to that school, I'm gonna jump off the plane, like all that, and then you're like, no, what do you want to do? You're like, I don't know. Yeah, like I come off on Iraq, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, I guess I go back to my job. Like I didn't know, and I did, and then 3 months later I quit because I was stupid. I hated that job. I didn't know I hated it until I went to Iraq and came back, and I thought it was gonna be my career job. Not so much. So it's good that you said. I love that you said, "Hey, I'm 42 and this is my first job as an adult in the civilian world, or first career opportunity."
It is.
It
is.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What does it feel like to step out of both the military and the class that you took and step into this like highly dynamic, genre of work, right? Which is marketing, and one that is so kind of vastly and dramatically different than what the military culture is, right? Marketing is so it's so connection based and understanding people, and the military is like, here's what people do and here's how they do it. Don't step outside those boundaries, and now you're doing marketing stuff. What was that transition like?
It's very surreal because it feels like I'm having like an outer body experience. Um, for me, being that even though this is my first time applying it in the civilian sector, I have worked with sales and marketing before as a recruiter. I sold the Army for 4 years, something untangible, versus like, hey, this is like selling air to somebody in a bag. Here you go. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say this, say this bag of air, this bag of oxygen. You need this, okay, for your existence, okay. So and you're gonna sip off this for the next 3 to 4 years, okay. And then when you get low, you're gonna buy another bag. So for me, I actually love recruiting. I end up loving it because I love people. I love being around people. I love just relating. And what I did was when I got to recruiting duty, I threw everything that I learned in school out the window. I forgot everything. Because you know what I noticed? I noticed that people just want you to be real with them. People want you to, hey, listen, here's the guts and the glory. Here's, the real. Here's the skinny. Okay. I'm gonna tell you. And I used to tell all my guys and all my recruits, hey, this is the first 3 weeks is gonna suck for you. It's gonna suck. You're gonna hate life. You're gonna want to come back home. You're gonna be cursing me out, or whoever, or the bus driver that drove you to MEPS. Like it's gonna suck. You know why? Because you're gonna have all these people coming together, all from all different walks of life. Some people that grew up with nothing. Some people that grew up with something. Some people that grew up with a little bit more than what both you two have at the same time. However, and guess what? You guys all have to come together to do one thing, and you're going to have all different views, and that's going to be really hard for you. So after you guys kind of figure that out, you figure each other out. After the first few weeks, you'll be fine, and then things will start to taper off. And I was just, I would tell people my story. This is why I joined. This is why I'm still in the Army. This is why, these are all of my these are my whys, basically. And then once I cleared that stigma of all recruiters are liars, because for me that was my biggest obstacle to overcome. Oh, you guys are liars. You just want me to join, blah, blah, this and that. And for me, it was easy. I just sat back and I talked with the families. I said, bring everybody. I'll give the bigger the better. So I would give the audience. I would talk to maybe 20 or 30 people, 20 or 30 people, family at one time. Hey, that's perfect. I don't have to repeat myself. All you guys come along and sit during this interview. So now that I'm on the civilian side of the house, I find myself kind of using some of the things that I did when I was in the Army. But at the same time, like I told you guys earlier, I'm my own worst enemy because for me, like I'm goal based. Hey, I set my tiers. I need to be here at this point. I need to be right here, within the 60-day mark, the 90-day mark. And if I feel that I'm like not remotely even close, it of course, it kills me because I'm like, why can't, or why aren't, or why is this guy doing this and I'm over here, I'm still sucking, But again, it's all about pacing yourself, and which I'm learning from Patrick, that it's about pacing yourself and really believing in what you're doing.
And this is, I'm going to ask a question for both of you. Mm-hmm. In building what you're building, and obviously Patrick, you're going to have a little bit more experience in this. Have you struggled with self? Have you struggled with, like, how do I define myself now as a civilian, following that, your work as a military and in the military and as a soldier? Have you struggled with that identity coming out of the military and trying to determine who do I want to be here?
Well, I mean, mine will be the shorter answer because it was a long time ago. But yeah, a little bit. Although the self I came from, it was the bottom of the barrel, and I joined the same reasons Raymond talked about. Like I was getting away from something. I wasn't going towards. I was just getting away. And I did find purpose, and I found, I wrestled with not going on to regular Army because I loved what I found there, that structure and the people around me I talked about earlier. And I wrestled with not re-enlisting. And so the reasons I joined were not the reasons I wanted to stay, or the reasons I did stay, or the reasons I excelled at the military. You can't do that with your head halfway in the game. You have to have your head fully in the game. So at the time when I out processed, which was 1989, so I had 6 years. Um, I, I did struggle with like life after that, and not wanting to run back to my good habits of the military that don't always fit in the corporate world. And in the 80s, it was a different set of world. The internet wasn't out. Sales was a lot different. Like, you had to compete to get a sales job. Now, anybody can get a sales job. And the difference was, what makes you excel? What makes you stay there? It's like saying, I'm an infantry squad leader, and then you get ousted because you just are a complete stooge. Being made a leader because you have rank and you demand respect, and then being a PFC and you command respect, and so you are the leader. There's a big difference. Same thing that happened. So there was a struggle. Now time is fast forwarded for me, so that um, like I said, it was a long time ago. Like Raymond's talking about having FaceTime and seeing the kids in pictures. And I remember standing in line in the rain waiting for a phone booth and putting quarters in, so just whole different world and whole different idea of that whole transition back to what's here, and not a lot of resources available. Not until probably about 5 years ago, when again, people ahead of me acted as mentors to me and helped me understand what is around for a veteran who never served. And I thought I wasn't a veteran really, because I didn't go to Iraq. I didn't go to Afghanistan. I didn't do that. And I felt almost ashamed when I saw veterans, like I didn't raise my hand like they did, and one of them told me, you raised your hand too, that you can't help, they didn't send you to battle. And, he had a lot of respect for me, and I gained some respect back. So, but Raymond could probably talk more in the more recent past about that transition from there to here, and sense of self.
Same question.
Well, for me, it was I don't know, it was really tough. Just trying to like put everything in. For me, I want to put everything in a bottle. I want to put everything in a bottle and make it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. And for me, trying to just dissect everything and say, make sense of it. So okay, life is simple, because to me, on the outside world was very simple for me. People just existed. Everything was fine. Yeah, everyone had a few issues here and there, but it wasn't as big as whatever you had going on in the military. So just the whole process for me of just trying to digest how to be a civilian, how to be out of the military. That's an entire thing in itself. Just thinking about, okay, how do I function now? How do I function that I don't have to get up and do this and do that? I'm not responsible for this. I'm only responsible for the things that are in my immediate circle. My family, my home, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it was dealing with learning how to be normal, and that may not make sense to some people. But when you get out of the military and you really see how different you act, it seems different to other people. Even just showing up at a barbecue, you know uh how for me, me and Jack became great friends when I retired. Me and Jack Daniels became better friends when I retired. And and you realize that, okay, I guess not everyone has the same tolerance as me and some of my other comrades did in the military. So you slowly start to see little things. You're like, okay, well, they do things different here. So people aren't jumping off garage buildings into like little tiny swimming pools, and for uh for like little accolades or treats or ribbons or whatever. The little fun things that we do that seems ridiculous or outrageous to most people. But for me, it was, I don't know, like for me, it's been very surreal. Starting a business, coming from the military, from an organization that you think is your everything, and it's so hard for you to try to detach from that and say, okay, this was part of my life before, this is a part of my life now. And for me, it was just the whole like, okay, I'm not Sergeant First Class Hookfin anymore. I'm Raymond. This is my world now. That's my past, which I'm very proud of, which, that's what I built my foundation on, my education, my training, just the way that I walk and talk every single day. That's me. I will always love the military, and anything behind it. So but again, coming over to the civilian side, there's a lot to navigate for those that are actually coming out of the military. No matter what branch you're in, it's scary. Shit's scary, and it scared me. And like, I was more afraid of being a civilian, even though I wanted it, than I was deploying.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, it was just like, all right, what do I do? Like, you have to find yourself. You have to find your purpose, because if not, then you're going to be lost, and things are going to get real dark. And you know, whatever whatever rabbit hole you decide to run down, it's gonna it's not going to be good for you. And I can say that through experience, having to deal with being having all that empty time space in between you know retirement versus what I'm doing now. You're going to have your bumps and bruises, you're going to have your ups and downs, trying to figure things out. But that's how we do. That's what makes you more resilient. And that's something that you're taught every day in the military, being resilient, and just kind of pushing through it and moving forward, but also recognizing your strengths and your weaknesses and saying, hey, this is what I can lean more towards, because I'm better in this area. Or knowing what your weaknesses are and saying, okay, I've identified that, so I'm not going to continue to beat my head against the wall, because that's not working, so I need to find a different path.
Well, and I just, if I could piggyback on talking about Raymond a little bit, one of the things I told him right from the start is that, you will be your own worst enemy. You're a high achieving, high accomplished individual in your 40s. This is like starting a brand new MOS, right? So what you did so well, I told him today, I'm like, you probably for your PT test could smoke a cigarette, eat a donut, and run the 2 miles at the same time with your eyes shut. Like, you could do that. And now you're starting over, and it's like someone rearranged the furniture in a room that you're familiar with, and they put a blindfold on you and spun you around. So you're going to bump into a bunch of shit, and you're going to fall down a lot, and you're going to get hurt and bumped and bruised. But what his strengths are that he pulled from the military are what will get him through, air quotes, the toughest times. And he's got the first month under his belt. And I told him today when we were talking, believe it or not, the hardest part is over. It's like you talked about, Raymond, where the first 2 weeks you're going to hate everybody around you. You're going to think the recruiter lied to you. You don't like this person. You don't like that. Then the dust begins to settle and you realize, I just laid a really good foundation and the house isn't built. So for those listeners who are transitioning for the first time, they're in the middle of transitioning, they're still friends with Jack Daniels, whatever it is. One of the things I can say that why I know Raymond's going to do so well is he was smart enough to reach out to a mentor that made sense to him, someone like me, who had been there and was just a little bit older, not wiser, just older. And just said, so we have this understanding together. So I called him today. I'm like, I think you're probably thinking about quitting. And he's like, yeah, probably twice last week I was. I'm like, good. That means you're trying hard. Now let's talk through those feelings, because that's normal, because you aren't that top sergeant. You're not, I when I see him in the health club, I'm like, hey, Top. And he's like, yeah, I'm not that guy anymore, though. I'm like, yeah, I know, but to me, you are. So you can take, the uniform off the man, but the uniform's still within the man, And so I think that the biggest thing is remember what made you as good as you are, and then be patient enough to get there again. Start another MOS and become that soldier you once were.
Yeah, one of the things the military does teach us is the ability to achieve. And once you've learned the ability to achieve, you got to rework those muscles. The challenge is, especially when you're tracking achievement, we often forget what skills and abilities we had to get there, because we take it for granted. Often we're like, well, like for me, I do public speaking. I'm like, what do you mean? Not everybody can go in front of a microphone and start talking about a random topic for 45 minutes. And it's like, yeah, no, that's not a thing. And so and it was actually one of my mentors, to your point, it was Brad Hurd. I think, I don't know if Dylan knows Brad. It was a couple of years ago. He's like, you realize that most people don't want to do what you do very so naturally. I'm like, oh, it's interesting, right? Because you don't realize the talents you have within you. Often we focus on the things that don't work out, or we focus on our shortcomings. When we take the time to analyze, well, why was I successful there? How did I achieve success? And what is repeatable? Then you can apply that same discipline to the next thing. There's a reason why certain people are successful. Elon Musk, for example, he started X.com, which is turned into PayPal. Right? If you said Elon Musk 20 years ago and said, "Oh, he's going to have a car company, launch rockets and a boring company," you'd be like, "Oh, it must be an engineer." No, it's a computer guy that figured out financing on computers, because he's a high achieving individual, and he chose to put his time, talents, and resources into different things. And now he owns Twitter and is, basically the most American thing ever, and he's not even American, with regard to what he's doing with free speech. Why? He saw a problem. He saw it from a different perspective, and he solved it in a way that only he could see. And so for you, and for all veterans that are going through this period, it's like you don't make it 20 years in the military, E6, E7, E8, what did you get out? 03, 04, 05, 06, right? You don't make it that far on sheer dumb luck. You don't make it because you did everything by the book every time. No, you had to have some grit. You had to have some willpower. You had to do things that your peers possibly didn't do. And because a lot of your peers don't make it 20 years. And even the peers that do make it 20 years, some of them would get hemmed up or lose a little rank along the way, or don't in your case, have the wealth of experience. I got a guy that I'm still in the Army Reserves. He's been in 22 years. He's been to 3 states and never has left the United States in his life. 22 years in the military.
Wow.
His number never got called. He was active duty, got out. As soon as he got out, his unit was deploying. So he tried to go back into that unit. They wouldn't let him in. So he joined the AGR. He was with a unit, got transitioned or transferred to a unit that just got back. Then the unit he was with had left. And then he became a retention officer like 10 years into his career. He's been doing that for 12 years. And he was born in Illinois. He went from Illinois to California to Illinois to Wisconsin, and he's back in Illinois. 22 years in the military. And with the exception of a couple years in California, he has spent the majority of his career within 90 minutes of where he grew up. He's never been overseas, never deployed, no combat patch, got like 4 ribbons, right? I mean, and it's like, okay, right? And he's going to get out as E7. So I look at him and I look at you and I'm like, well, look at the wealth of experience that you've had, the decisions you made, the times that, right, when for him, he did his first 4 years and he got out because he thought he was smarter. Then he went back to his hometown, and within 6 months, he's like, yep, this sucks. Right? You had the intestinal fortitude to say, okay, no, I'm going to do this thing. And along the way, you decided early in your career, I'm a career guy. You kept saying the word strap in. I got this, right? I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to be successful in this. And so now you can take that exact same mentality and mindset to what you're doing now. Because you didn't know shit when you left the south side of Chicago and joined the Army. You knew that they'd have you and that's it. And now you're in the same spot with Patrick, right? You don't know shit about what you're doing. Sounds good. Perseverance is a hell of a skill set. Because I'll tell you what, there are plenty of people, especially your peers and the generations below you, me being and myself and Dylan, we can tell you perseverance ain't a strength of the younger generation. Mm-hmm. They are the shiny object syndrome. Oh, y'all gonna pay me a nickel more? I'm jumping. Oh, I can have one more day working from home a week. I'm fucking leaving. Well, you were like, what, 20 plus years? Let's go. Yeah. Oh, you're going to throw some rank at me and I'm going to choose my family over my rank? Bet. So perseverance and prioritization, that will take you further and farther than a piece of paper and education, a little bit of experience that you might not have yet. Because experience takes time. And experience is a mother. Education is simpler than experience. They tell you, learn this, memorize that, write this. Experience is a punch in the face that you didn't know was coming. I tell you, and I've been in sales, man, you got to chase 100 doors, and 98 of them are going to slam in your face, and 2 of them are going to open. It might be the first 2. It might be the last 2. Math says it's 2 in the middle. And after you get through 100 doors, then you're like, all right, bet, add another 0. Go do 1,000. Whatever it is. And I hated this. I remember my third month in business. My goal at the time was to get into senior living, get our promotional material into senior living facilities. I went 0 for 9. Went to 9 different senior living facilities. I couldn't get past a gatekeeper. I remember coming back to my brother that day and I'm like, man, you were out there banging jobs, making money, and I drove around and shit the bed. I went 0 for 9 that day. I felt like, man, I let you down. And my brother, right, he's 10 years my junior, was like, well, we know it's supposed to work. Go there and do it again. Next day, I went 12 for 13. So the math said 50%, right? Not bad. I didn't know that, though, when I was 0 for 9. And so if you're having self-doubt, it means you give a shit. And if it's better to fail early because you're going to figure out what doesn't work. I'd rather have that than be successful right off the bat and then not know why I was successful. And then you get in a rut and you go, and you go live in the past. Right? Mm-hmm. Rock bottom is a hell of a place to build a foundation. So the little bit I'm hearing, it's like, man, you got some skills and abilities, and at 42 years old, you got 20 years to perfect this craft. No different than you spent 20 years perfecting your other craft. And look at where you were at 18 versus 38. Now look at where you're going to be at 62 versus 42. When you have that mindset of perseverance, you will be successful. You took the 3-4 years to reset. Now it's time to rearm and move out. I'm saying this to you as I say it to myself, as I say it to everybody I come in contact with. It is easy to get discouraged, right? Easy come, easy go. It is simple to figure it the fuck out. Document what's working and persevere.
No, because I wrote about this. The saying is, discouragement is the mother of failure, and failure is the bastard child of excuses. And find me someone who's making excuses, and I'll find you someone who's giving you reasons to fail. And this is what I talked to Raymond about this morning, was the whole idea, like what I struggled with when we talk about transitioning. I struggled with not getting rewarded solely for my accomplishments in the corporate world. I was so used to, you do this really well, the Army promotes you, you're in charge. I got out as an E5. I was hard charging. I was recognized. I was everything, and man, you start to live that, you start to believe that, and it carries you through a lot of things. And it was hard to deal with, like, just, I called it before incompetence, or, the corporate politics and people who aren't as accomplished moving up or being in charge of you. And you can't just be like, yeah, okay, LT, I'll really show these guys how to do it, and so, that was a struggle. And my recommendation to all veterans is that there is a great network of veterans. You can find them anywhere online. It's people find people who you have that camaraderie, and make that your first step. Make that a building block. Doesn't mean that person is going to be your mentor for life. Raymond and I may be connected for 6 months. I personally, when I met him, he was talking about getting started with a franchise. I connected him with a friend of mine who is a broker for franchises. And in the meantime, he wanted to sharpen these skills. I'm like, I have this place where I can help you sharpen these skills, and I'll be glad to. It may not be a permanent thing for me or for him, or we'll be best friends for the rest of our lives. But I think you have to find someone, and if you don't know what you want, know what you don't want.
Yep.
And write that down and define, I don't want this, because pretty soon when you sort out everything you don't want, you'll be left with everything you ever wanted. And then if you want that and you've never done it, find somebody who has done it and has sustained it, and ask them, what are you doing different than me? And then be humble enough to fucking listen to them, right? Don't start saying, well, I used to do this, or I was this, or that doesn't matter. Those days are over. I can't go back to tomorrow and change what I had for dinner. How can I make that affect tomorrow? I can't. So find someone who's done it and say to them, what are you doing different than me? And then be willing to listen to it.
Yeah, you talked about your experience at the the car dealership. Mm-hmm. I worked at a gas station years. I loved it. Anyways, the car dealership, you talked about that. And this is the difference. You will find in the civilian world, people will fuck you over to make a dime. That's a fact. Simon Sinek talks about this. He talks about how the difference between the military and the civilian world, it's like in the military, you're willing to give for the greater good, and in the civilian world, you're willing to take for your greater good. And that's fucking as real as the day is long. And I found that out working in corporate America. It was like, no matter what I did, someone else was going to try to take credit, trying to look over my shoulder. And then to your point, Patrick, my mentor was a sales guy for the Waukesha County Business Alliance. He met me, and he had convinced me to join the alliance because that was his job. He was a good salesman. And he had spent 5-6 years in the Marine Corps, and he leaned in on that and, kind of attaboyed me and whatever. You made me feel cool. And years later, when I needed a mentor, right, he was a sales guy. I reached out to him. I was like, I remember I called him one time. I was like, hey, actually, the first time, my look, everyone. So if you ever read me in the civilian world, I have a unique look. It's a ball cap, black T-shirt, camo pants, BDU, the old Woodlands, right? And then work boots, right? He's the one that gave me the look. Why? Because I went to a Panera Bread for him to pitch to me the Waukesha County Business Alliance, and he's telling, oh, you go to networking events. I'm like, what the hell is that? And he told me what a networking event was. And I go, cool. What do I wear? And he looked at me. He's like, yeah, go looking like that. He goes, you'll stick out. He goes, and it's your brand. I'm like, all right, bet. Now, I didn't realize he was setting me up for failure in the short term and success in the long. The first year, I went to networking events wearing camo pants and a black T-shirt. I got the look. I remember my mom. She wore a camo pants one time and a T-shirt to a networking event, and they gave her the look. She's like, how do you do it? And I'm like, the first year was just pure. I love the old saying, right? Spite is a hell of a drug, and success is more sustainable. I'll tell you what, that first year, 2 years, it was spiteful. Like, fuck you. You don't think I belong in this room? Let me tell you something. I'll be here. I'll be here next month. I'll be here next year. I'm going to keep showing up because, especially in networking, people are come and go. Last week, I was at a Weins conference down in New Orleans. I've only gone to this conference twice now. And last year in Vegas, I went this year again. I had no less than a dozen people come up to me and be like, hey, I know who you are. I saw you last year. I've seen you on social. I heard about your podcast. Because they noticed the camo pants. They saw the black T-shirt. I'm 6'4". I stick out in a crowd.
Sure does.
Why? Because I was true to the own self be true. My mom always said growing up, right? Catholic, Bible thumping type, right? And it's like I had to be true to who I was, my strengths, and stick it out. And over time, it worked. And I didn't give myself permission to do that. However, I had a mentor that told me to do that. And that same mentor is now by my business coach for the last 3.5 years. Because when he became a business coach, he'd already been mentoring me for 4 years. And I even joked with him. I said, why would I do that? Now I got to pay for it. Every other time I called you, I wasn't on your dime. Now I got to pay you to hang out with you, right? And joining what I'm in now, I'm in a CEO roundtable. Biggest decision, best decision I ever made for myself as a business leader. The military often we're assigned mentors. I think that's the biggest thing. You are assigned a mentor, right? The biggest difference between the military and the civilian world when it comes to hierarchy is in the military, the expectation is you learn the job of the person above you and below you because you can always cover up or cover down. In the civilian world, everyone has to justify their existence and their position, how important they are, and they're never replaceable. And so when you get in the civilian world, if they're nice to you, it means they probably want to sell you some shit. When you find a mentor, hold on to them tight. And my challenge to you and everybody else, if you don't have a mentor, go look for one. Go find a Facebook group, find a podcast, find some type of medium that speaks to you. And then to what Patrick said, go ask someone for their time and do it in a way that's humble, right? Don't do let me pick your brain. Let me bend your ear. No, like, hey, I've seen you've been successful. I want some of the same things you have. And I want to learn from you on how to get there. I get emails all the time, people that listen to my other podcast, the Trash Talk Business Podcast. And they're like, man, I want to get where you're at someday. I'm like, well, no, get better than where you were yesterday. Let's do that. Let's figure that out. And over time, I'll give them the answers to the test because I want them to achieve. Because they come back and they teach me shit that I don't know because for 14 years of doing junk removal, I know a lot. And sometimes, a lot of knowledge isn't always great either. I'm not as flexible as I would have been year 1, 2, or 3. And so my challenge to you and everybody else, find you a mentor. You don't know when it's going to pay dividends. To Patrick's point, you find someone that's got what you want, find that person and go find 9 others. Because you don't want to be the one person, right? Then you're not trying to live in somebody else's life and their dream. People fail at that. It's one of the things that veterans do. They're like, oh, I see this guy's got all these things. Let me just go, right? That's when you said franchise. I did the old oof, right? Because I spent 4 years in a franchise system. Let me tell you why not to do that, right? Yeah. But go find 10 people that have things that you think you might want. And what you'll figure out is among those 10 people, they probably all have something that you want. 1/3 of them, I'll argue, probably got there in a way that makes sense to you. 1/3 of them have what they, have the what. And 1/3 of them, it's smoke and mirrors. There's people I follow that, man, I want to be like that guy. I want to partner with that guy. And the closer I got, the farther I wanted to be. Right? So go get 10. That's just a good round number. And what you'll realize, you'll start to find things. If you just follow the coattails of one person or try to ride the coattails, you got a 1 in 10 chance he's the right person or she is the right person. So that's my challenge to you and everybody else, even right now in this time where it's like you re-enter the workplace, you're in your 40s. What do? Well, it ain't about reinventing yourself. I hate that. Reinvent yourself. Nah, you fucking good who you are. Figure out who the fuck you are and maximize your strengths. Take the guidance from the trusted guide. On the hero's journey, you need the helper. You need the trusted guide. Eventually, you're going to figure it out on your own, but you ain't never going to get to the underworld. You're never going to get to that place without the mentor that pushes you, because you don't even know what that place looks like yet.
You know, Andy. You know, Andy. Also too, like just to reiterate, like, bam, there you go. just to reiterate on what you said, as far as like not saying that you're not reinventing yourself, because you have to really know what you want. And my advice to those that are getting out, you have to figure out what you want first. Like, what do you want to do? Like, I knew and you're going to be at different places. That's going to mean something different for you based off your age, based off your experience, based off of what you basically want to do. For me, I knew I didn't want to work for anybody. I've always had that entrepreneurial mindset even before I joined the Army. I wanted to do that. But of course, I had to put on the back burner while I learned a different skill, while I served a different purpose. Then towards the time I was getting out, I was like, you know what, hey, this is what I want to do. That's why I went back to school, studied marketing, boom, got it. Checked it off, checked it off the block. The next thing, I'm like, okay, so now I need to, I know definitely I want to start my own business. Okay, how do I do that? How do I convert what I learned on paper in real time? Because it's different. What I learned 3-4 years ago, it's irrelevant now. It was in a book. That has nothing to do with how the world runs today. Because guess what? Laws change, people change. The world is continually evolving around you. And again, with you going out, you telling people to go out and look for a mentor, look for different people to talk to, this and that. Patrick introduced me to someone. I sat down, I had a few Zoom calls with them, spoke with them, kind of spin off a little bit, came back to Patrick, talking with him. And I found out, okay, this is where I need to be right now. This is where I need to be. And if you don't do that, if you don't maximize your opportunities, you're going to sell yourself short. You're going to miss out on a lot of things that could have been for you, that you're like, you know what, I'm just going to stay here with this one thing because this person looks like they're the best at what they do. Not to sell that person short, but guess what? They're in competition with someone else. There's a reason why they're at that level, but guess what? They're not the only one. There's someone else that you can learn from as well. And it could either be they can either be your senior or your junior, and it doesn't matter. Some people think that they get their heads wrapped around this whole age thing, because I learned a lot from guys way younger than me. My soldiers. I'd ask them for their input. Hey guys, look, what are we doing? Whoever has the best decision, can we get this job done efficiently? Within a certain time frame. Hey, let's do it. Let's knock it out. But yeah, but to allude to what you said, just don't sell yourself short, and don't feel that you have to reinvent yourself, because you've already built that. That's you. That's your person. People are going to look at you. You're a veteran. That first and foremost, and that's going to speak volumes, of your character right off the bat. Everything else, you just have to kind of like, speak for yourself and just promote yourself and believe in yourself. And that's the biggest thing. If you don't believe in yourself, you've already lost the battle.
Mm-hmm. Dylan, what you got for us as we start to wind this thing down?
You want to talk Nuggets?
We can talk Nuggets.
Honestly,
okay, we'll do that. We'll talk Nuggets.
I love Patrick. I love when you said the incompetence, or when you brought up the incompetence, because
that's what I wrote down.
I mean, it's honest and upfront, and obviously me and Andy love that here. And I want to add something to it. It's incompetence and it's disconnection, right? Which is completely the opposite of that unwritten code that we live by in the military, where we have to be connected. We have to be unified. We have this underlying rule of law that we all know that the team comes first. And when you step into the civilian world, that is not there. That unity, that code, it doesn't exist unless that company is built from, from people that are just deeply connected. And so it's to me, it's even more than just incompetence. It's outright disconnection. I do not want to be a part of your group. I just want to make money. Right. Like, and that's the unfortunate truth about a lot of corporate, and I shouldn't even say just corporate, it's just work, right? It's that we've built a culture around this version of capitalism that we have, where we look at the structure that we exist in, and we're like, I don't want to be friends with these people. I don't want this job. I'm leaving next year. I'm going to Nashville next year. I'm going to do things, right? Like it's this outright disconnection and also incompetence that is is this unseen variable for veterans to step into this workforce and say, I'm going to do some good here. And then you get this pervasive kind of hate that comes from veterans that see this for the first time, and they're like, I hate the civilian world. And then they come join me in the National Guard because they're like, fuck civilians. This is dumb. Right. Because it just doesn't exist, like the code that we have in the military. And
Dylan, we're different.
Yeah.
Okay, let's face that. Let's own it. We're different.
Right.
We were raised different through the military. My saying is, the higher up the tree the baboon climbs, the more you see its ass. Right. So you sit with your infantry squad and you clean your rifle in the field, or you sit in the town hall meeting and listen to a politician. They're chocolate Easter bunnies. They're all hollow on the inside. You can't rely on them. There's nothing you can count on. So,
Patrick, we should have you talking a lot more.
We're gonna need no. We already got a second episode. We're going to have to line up with Patrick because he's chilling this whole time.
No, it's just that we are different, and I don't care if you're 20 years in or you're 6 years in like me or whatever number of years I was. E5 is different than LT1.
Yeah.
And, I'm a big fan of preparation comes from experience, and the more prepared you are, the better you are. And a classroom is just not it. And so, whether it's insincerity, whether it's incompetence, to the military person, it looks like incompetence because we are used to get this shit done. What's the chain of command? What's the mission? And we're mission oriented, not obstacle oriented, and not stab you in the back to make sure I get 6 feet farther ahead. And so that's a struggle a lot of military people have. And that's why they come to me for coaching, because they need help. And that's why they become entrepreneurs, because they can't put up with all those things. And it's very easy for us to put things into compartments and buckets. And when you do that as a veteran, you can either find yourself isolated, or you can find yourself surrounded by other folks who are empowered and engaged and can help you with the greater mission. So, to your point, whatever the tag is, incompetence, stupidity, ass kissing, politician, who knows what, it's not what we're used to. We are different. So own it and do something with it. The other thing we keep talking about, know what you want to do and that type of thing. I'll challenge you. Know what you don't want to do. Make lists of what I don't want this. Raymond's a good example, because he's saying, I want to be an entrepreneur. He's not saying I want to sell large format graphics, which is the task he's doing now, but he wants to run a business. I mean, and what he learned in the classroom, probably the first 3 days of getting incorporated, I probably told him 3 things that was like what they taught him, and they didn't even teach him, but he sat in a classroom reading books and taking tests on it. So that's the value of a mentor. They're going to show you the shortcut. The rest is up to you.
Raymond, top takeaway.
Top takeaway for me is make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. 18 months out minimum. 18 months minimum before your departure, because that's going to help prepare. That 18 months that you take time to do that is going to put you 4 to 5 years ahead of anyone else that doesn't. Because you're going to.
I like that we had another guest that said minimum 2 years. So you're 2 independent thinkers saying the same thing. That and also that had experienced it and experienced it successfully. because the people that experienced unsuccessfully can't tell you what worked. They can only tell you what didn't work.
Exactly.
Well, it's also,
Exactly.
I mean, listen to you and me, Andy. Like we've started I started my business 7-8 years before I'm even thinking about retirement. And how many years have you been doing this while you're?
Oh, I did 7 years of junk removal before I got serious about it. I started 2009. It wasn't until 2016 that I'm like, okay, now I'm all in.
Yeah.
So I had 7 years of figuring out a lot. I learned a lot in those. 7 years, kind of like 7 years in reserves. It ain't like 7 years in active duty, but it's a hell of a lot farther than 7 years of doing nothing.
Right.
And so 7 years of active, 7 years of doing junk removal before I took it serious. Now I'm 7 years in this way, and it's like, man, it was a lifetime ago. Yeah. And yet I learned there's still things to this day I'm using, and people that I met 14, 15 years ago that I'm still using every day in my work life. And I had to go through those paces. I also had to know what it was like to be doing it part-time,
I don't think
top takeaway, I wrote that down: accepted incompetence in the civilian world. And I think that is at all levels. And so what I've realized over time is there are certain places I don't go. There's certain grocery stores I don't go to because I realize how frustrated I got with so many people. And I realize, that's the way the civilian world is. And even now, when I go back on the military installations for 2-3 weeks at a crack, I'm like, oh, this feels normal. This is where people treat each other with respect. This is where everybody plays by the same set of rules and values and beliefs. This is where people look you in the eye and nod their head. I'll tell you what, when you come to here in the civilian world, it ain't like that. So I like what you said about accepted incompetence, because it made me laugh at first and kind of vengeful, like, yeah, those motherfuckers. And in actuality, I had to realize, the world ain't going to adjust to Andy. So I have to figure out, get in where you fit in. Get in where I fit in, or force myself in if it's a room worth being in. And so I really like that, because not everyone's going to be an A player. Not everyone wants to be an A player. And so you got to find the A players and the A people and be around them. And that's the difference between being a victim and a victor of your story. So that's what I got out of it. Real quick, Pat, you had mentioned you got a book coming out. What's the name of the book? When's it coming out? Let's give you a free plug. We're going to have you on another episode, because apparently this is like the second time you've talked all episode. And that's fine.
I'm like a sock puppet to Raymond over here, so that's okay. Right. Listen, no. I think the world of him, and I invited him here because I think he has so much to offer, and he's an absolute phenomenal influencer. I think that people will listen and get some good things from him. So my first book is called Sell the Difference. It's about differentiation in the workplace. And I have all walks of life telling me this is having an impact on their life. So Sell the Difference. You can only get it at my website, pksolutionsgroup.com, or on audiobook on any of the platforms. And then I just finished publishing my second book called Create the Difference. It's a leader's guide to strategy, growth, and hiring. So it's a leader's book, and that's only going to be coming out in audiobook. I actually just approved the covers today, so next week or so you'll see some stuff on social media announcing Create the Difference, which is for leaders.
I like it. All right, well, hey, do appreciate both your time, Patrick. We'll have you back on another time. Appreciate you getting Raymond on here to tell the story, because it's the first person that we've had that had that level of, or not the first, but maybe the person that's still in it, still in those first couple of years back home and working through those things. And that's where the majority of our listeners are. So Patrick, Raymond, really do appreciate it. Dylan, as always, thank you for coming on here. It's the Welcome Home podcast, where we talk about the transformation from troops in boots to being a veteran in the civilian world. And it's important that we take time during this very pivotal point of our lives to really set the tone of what we want out of the world and go out and achieve it. If you haven't heard this recently from anybody else, welcome home.